Marcus wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag, the familiar smell of engine oil filling his small workshop on Kepler Station. The cramped space barely qualified as a repair bay, but it was his. 3 years ago, when the Galactic Trade Union had opened the outer rim stations to human workers, Marcus had jumped at the chance. Earth was overcrowded, jobs were scarce, and the promise of steady work fixing alien machinery had seemed like a dream. Now, surrounded by the constant hum of alien technology he barely understood, Marcus sometimes wondered if he'd made the right choice. The other species tolerated humans, but barely. They saw them as useful for manual labor, nothing more. Humans were new to the galactic community, having only made first contact 15 years ago. Most aliens still viewed them as primitive creatures who had somehow stumbled into space travel. The workshop door chimed, and Marcus looked up to see a figure in elaborate robes gliding into his space. The being was tall and elegant, with pale blue skin and, for arms, clearly one of the aristocratic Zephyrians who controlled most of the station's upper levels. Marcus had never seen one in his workshop before. They usually sent servants to handle such mundane tasks as equipment repairs. "Are you the human mechanic?" the Zephyrian asked, their voice carrying the musical quality typical of their species. "That's me. Marcus Chen. What can I fix for you?" Marcus set down his tools and gave the alien his full attention. Rich customers were rare, and he couldn't afford to waste the opportunity. The Zephyrian's 4 eyes studied Marcus carefully. "I am Lord Vexhai, personal attendant to Her Imperial Majesty Empress Zaralin of the Zirian Empire. We have a most unusual problem." Marcus tried not to show his surprise. The Zirian Empire controlled half the known galaxy, and their Empress was practically a legend. Stories of her beauty, her intelligence, and her ruthless efficiency in both war and diplomacy were told across 1,000 worlds. What could the Empress possibly need from a small-time human mechanic? "The Empress has a companion," Lord Vexhai continued. "A rare albino Zirian leopard named Snow. The creature is extremely valuable, both sentimentally and politically. It was a gift from the High Council when she ascended the throne, and it has never left her side." "Okay," Marcus said slowly. "But I fix machines, not animals." "That is precisely the problem. Snow is not entirely biological." Lord Vexhai's expression grew troubled. 3 months ago, the Leopard was severely injured in an assassination attempt on the Empress. To save its life, our best bioengineers replaced much of its internal structure with cybernetic components. The creature is now more machine than animal. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Cybernetic enhancement of living beings was controversial throughout the galaxy. Most species found the practice disturbing, a violation of natural order. But the Zirions were known for pushing boundaries that others feared to cross. "The problem," Lord Vexhai continued, "is that Snow's cybernetic systems are malfunctioning. Our bioengineers understand the organic components, and our technicians understand the mechanical parts, but no one understands how they work together. The creature's behavior has become increasingly erratic. Yesterday, it attacked 3 servants and destroyed a priceless artifact from the Empress's collection." "And you think I can help?" Marcus asked. "You humans have a reputation for improvisation and unconventional thinking. Our finest minds have failed to solve this problem. The Empress is distressed. Snow is the only living thing she truly trusts, and if we cannot repair it soon, she may order it destroyed for the safety of those around her." Marcus thought about the implications. If he succeeded, he would have the gratitude of the most powerful being in the galaxy. If he failed, he would likely never work again, assuming he survived the failure. But something about the desperation in Lord Vexhai's voice told him this wasn't really a request. "What's in it for me?" he asked. "Success would bring rewards beyond your imagination. Failure." Lord Vexhai let the sentence hang in the air. "The Empress does not tolerate disappointment well." Marcus nodded slowly. He'd heard the stories about the Empress's temper. Entire star systems had been reduced to ash for lesser offenses than failing her beloved pet. "When do we start?" he asked. Lord Vexhai's 4 eyes brightened. Immediately. Gather your tools. You will be transported to the Imperial flagship within the hour. As the Zephyrian glided out of his workshop, Marcus began packing his equipment with trembling hands. He'd grown up tinkering with old cars and broken electronics in the slums of New Detroit. Now he was about to work on the cybernetic pet of the galaxy's most feared ruler. The irony wasn't lost on him. An hour later, Marcus found himself aboard a sleek transport ship, watching Kepler Station shrink behind them. The pilot, another Zephyrian, spoke only to confirm their destination, the flagship of the Imperial fleet, a massive dreadnought called the Void's Edge that was currently orbiting the gas giant Thanatos Prime. As they approached the ship, Marcus felt his breath catch. The Void's Edge was enormous, easily 5 kilometers long and bristling with weapons that could crack planets. It was painted in the deep purple and silver of the Imperial colors, and every surface seemed to gleam with deadly purpose. The transport ship was guided into a docking bay that could have housed a small city. Marcus was met by a squad of Xerian soldiers in powered armor, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. They escorted him through corridors lined with what appeared to be living metal, walls that pulsed gently with an inner light. The Xerions themselves were an impressive species. Tall and graceful, with skin that ranged from pale silver to deep purple, they moved with a fluid precision that suggested both great strength and perfect control. Their culture prized efficiency and order above all else, and it showed in every aspect of their ship's design. Marcus was brought to a laboratory deep within the ship's core. The room was circular, with walls covered in displays showing biological and mechanical schematics. In the center of the room was an examination table, and on that table lay the most beautiful and terrifying creature Marcus had ever seen. Snow was magnificent even in its unconscious state. The leopard was larger than any Earth feline, nearly the size of a small horse, with muscles that rippled beneath its pure white fur. But what made Marcus's breath catch were the obvious cybernetic modifications. Parts of the creature's skull had been replaced with gleaming metal, and he could see the subtle outlines of artificial organs beneath its skin. "Magnificent, isn't it?" a new voice said from behind him. Marcus turned to see a figure that made every alien he'd met so far pale in comparison. Empress Zaralyn was breathtaking, with skin like polished silver and eyes that seemed to hold the depth of space itself. She wore simple robes that somehow managed to convey more authority than any crown or scepter ever could. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, dropping to one knee as he'd seen others do. "Rise," she commanded, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate in his bones. "Lord Vexai tells me you may be able to help Snow. I confess I am skeptical. You are very young, and very human." Marcus stood, trying to project more confidence than he felt. "I've been working with hybrid systems since I was a kid, Your Majesty. Sometimes an outside perspective can see things that experts miss." The Empress studied him with those impossibly deep eyes. "Show me." Marcus approached the examination table, pulling out his diagnostic tools. As he began scanning Snow's cybernetic components, he was amazed by the sophistication of the work. The bioengineers had seamlessly integrated mechanical and biological systems in ways that Earth science couldn't even imagine. But, as he studied the data, a pattern began to emerge. The cybernetic components were fighting against the organic ones, creating a constant state of internal conflict. It was like watching two different operating systems trying to run on the same computer. "The problem isn't with individual components," Marcus said after an hour of careful examination. "It's with the integration protocol. The mechanical parts are trying to impose machine logic on biological processes, while the organic systems are rejecting the artificial constraints." "Our bioengineers said the same thing," the Empress replied coldly. "They were unable to solve it." "That's because they're thinking like Xerions," Marcus said, then immediately regretted his boldness. But the Empress didn't strike him down, so he continued. "Xerian technology is based on perfect order and control. But biological systems thrive on controlled chaos. You can't make a living creature act like a machine without destroying what makes it alive." The Empress stepped closer, her presence both magnetic and terrifying. "What do you propose?" Marcus took a deep breath. "I need to rewrite the integration software. Instead of trying to control the biological systems, the cybernetics need to learn to work with them. It'll be like teaching two different species to dance together instead of forcing one to march in lockstep with the other. How long? She asked. Give me 3 days, Marcus said. The Empress nodded once. You will have whatever resources you require. But, understand this, human, if Snow dies because of your interference, you will join it in death. If you succeed, you will have earned a reward beyond your wildest dreams. As the Empress glided from the room, Marcus realized his hands were shaking again. He was about to attempt the most complex piece of programming in his life, with the fate of both himself and a magnificent creature hanging in the balance. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. The first step was understanding exactly how the cybernetic and biological systems were currently interfacing. The code was unlike anything he'd seen before, written in a programming language that seemed to be based on mathematical harmonies rather than logical structures. Hours passed as Marcus traced through subroutines and data pathways, mapping the incredible complexity of Snow's hybrid system. The more he learned, the more impressed he became with the original engineer's work. They had created something truly remarkable, a perfect fusion of technology and biology. But they had made one crucial error. They had assumed that control was the answer, that the mechanical components needed to dominate the biological ones. Instead, Marcus began to see a different solution: cooperation. Working through the night, Marcus began rewriting key sections of code. Instead of rigid commands, he created flexible protocols that could adapt to biological rhythms. Instead of overriding organic processes, the cybernetics would learn to enhance them. It was like composing music instead of writing instructions, creating harmony instead of imposing order. And, slowly, gradually, Snow's vital signs began to stabilize. As dawn approached in the ship's artificial day cycle, Marcus finally allowed himself to hope that his approach might actually work. But he knew the real test would come when Snow awoke, when the creature's consciousness returned to its transformed body. That moment would determine not just Snow's fate, but his own. Snow's eyes opened like twin stars coming to life in the darkness. Marcus, who had been dozing in a chair beside the examination table after 36 hours of continuous work, jerked awake as the leopard's enhanced senses came online. The creature's pupils dilated, then contracted, as its optical implants synchronized with its biological vision. For a moment, the leopard lay perfectly still, and Marcus held his breath. Then, Snow raised its massive head, looking directly at him with an intelligence that seemed almost human. The creature's cybernetic implants glowed softly beneath its white fur, no longer fighting against its biological systems but working in perfect harmony. "Easy there," Marcus whispered, keeping his voice low and calm. "You've been through a lot." Snow tilted its head, studying the human with curious golden eyes. The aggression and confusion that had marked its behavior before the shutdown were completely gone. Instead, the leopard seemed alert but peaceful, its enhanced systems providing data about its environment without overwhelming its natural instincts. The laboratory door opened, and Empress Zaralyn entered with her usual fluid grace. The moment Snow saw her, the creature's entire demeanor changed. It rose to its feet in one smooth motion, muscles rippling beneath cybernetic enhanced fur, and bounded across the room to her side. The Empress's composed facade cracked for just a moment as Snow nuzzled against her, the leopard's purr resonating through both organic and mechanical vocal cords to create a sound unlike anything in the natural world. She placed her hand on the creature's head, her fingers tracing the seamless join between fur and metal. "How do you feel, my dear friend?" she murmured to the leopard in the musical Zirian language. Snow responded by rubbing against her legs, then turning to look at Marcus with what could only be described as gratitude. The leopard approached the human slowly, its enhanced senses undoubtedly taking in every detail about him. When it reached Marcus, Snow did something unexpected. It sat down and offered its paw. Marcus, hardly believing what he was seeing, reached out and gently shook the massive paw. Snow's purr grew louder, and the leopard's tail swished in obvious contentment. "Remarkable," the Empress said, her voice filled with wonder. "In all the years Snow has been with me, it has never shown such immediate trust to a stranger." "What did you do?" Marcus stood, his legs stiff from hours of sitting. I didn't just fix the technical problems, Your Majesty. I taught the systems to work together instead of fighting each other. But, more than that, I made sure the cybernetics enhanced Snow's natural instincts instead of suppressing them. Explain, she commanded. Before the modifications, Snow was a predator with perfect instincts for reading people and situations. The original programming tried to replace those instincts with logical analysis. But, instinct isn't inferior to logic, it's just a different kind of intelligence. Now the cybernetics amplify Snow's natural abilities instead of overriding them. As if to demonstrate Marcus's point, Snow suddenly tensed, its enhanced hearing picking up something the others couldn't detect. The Leopard moved to place itself between the Empress and the laboratory door, its cybernetic systems seamlessly interfacing with its predatory instincts. Seconds later, the door opened to admit Lord Vexhai and several other court officials. Snow relaxed immediately, having identified them as familiar and non-threatening. Your Majesty, Lord Vexhai said, bowing deeply. The Council of Admirals requests your presence for the morning briefing. The Empress nodded, but her attention remained focused on Marcus. Walk with me, human. There are matters we must discuss. As they left the laboratory, Snow padded silently beside them, its enhanced senses constantly scanning for threats. Marcus noticed that the Leopard's behavior was completely different from what Lord Vexhai had described. Instead of aggressive and unpredictable, Snow was alert but calm, protective but not hostile. The corridors of the Void's Edge were even more impressive in daylight. The living metal walls pulsed with gentle bioluminescence, and Marcus could see that the ship itself was a hybrid of biological and technological systems, much like Snow. Everything about Xerian culture seemed to blend the organic and mechanical in ways that Earth science couldn't begin to match. Tell me about yourself, the Empress said as they walked. How does a human from the Outer Rim learn to work with technology beyond his species' understanding? Marcus chose his words carefully. I grew up poor, Your Majesty. On Earth, if something broke and you couldn't afford to replace it, you learned to fix it or you went without. I spent my childhood taking apart broken electronics and putting them back together. When I got older, I specialized in hybrid systems, machines that used both digital and analog components. And you see similarities between those primitive hybrid systems and Snow's modifications? Not similarities, Your Majesty. Principles. Whether you're connecting a digital processor to an analog radio or cybernetic implants to a living brain, the challenge is the same, making two different types of systems communicate effectively. They entered an observation deck with a massive window overlooking the fleet. Marcus could see dozens of ships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of Thanatos Prime's distant star. The sight was both beautiful and intimidating. You interest me, the Empress said, turning to face him. Most beings who meet me are either terrified or trying to gain something. You seem to be neither. Marcus considered this. I am terrified, Your Majesty. But terror doesn't help me do good work, so I try to set it aside. As for gaining something, I'm already gaining more than I ever dreamed of just by being here. Snow, who had been sitting quietly beside them, suddenly stood and moved to the window. The Leopard's enhanced vision had detected something in the distance that the others couldn't see. Its cybernetic implants began glowing brighter, and it let out a low growl. What is it? The Empress asked, her hand instinctively moving to the weapon at her side. Marcus watched Snow's behavior, noting how the Leopard's cybernetic and biological systems were working together to process information. It's detected something, but it's not sure if it's a threat. The enhanced senses are picking up data that its natural instincts can't categorize. As if responding to Marcus's analysis, Snow turned and approached the Empress, gently taking the hem of her robe in its teeth and tugging toward the exit. It wants us to leave, the Empress said, understanding immediately. At that moment, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The observation deck's blast shields began closing, and Marcus could see energy discharges in the distance where Snow had been staring. Incoming attack force, came the announcement over the ship's communication system. All hands to battle stations. The Empress was already moving, her ceremonial robes flowing around her as she strode toward the bridge. Snow stayed close beside her, while Marcus found himself hurrying to keep up.
How did it know?
Marcus asked as they moved through corridors now filled with running crew members. Snow has always had exceptional intuitive abilities, the Empress replied without slowing. But they were compromised by the cybernetic modifications. If your repairs have restored them. Enhanced them, Marcus corrected.
The cybernetics aren't just restoring Snow's natural abilities, they're amplifying them beyond biological limits. They reached the bridge, a vast chamber dominated by holographic displays showing the approaching enemy fleet.
Marcus recognized the ship designs as belonging to the Hegemony, a coalition of species that had been at war with the Xerian Empire for decades.
Report, the Empress commanded as she took her place at the center of the bridge. Hegemony Strike Force, Your Majesty, the tactical officer reported. 47 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts.
They came out of hyperspace at the system's edge and are approaching at maximum acceleration.
How did they find us? Demanded the fleet admiral. The Empress's expression was grim. We've been betrayed.
Someone leaked our position. She turned to Snow, who was standing alert beside her command chair.
Can you help us identify the traitor? Snow's cybernetic implants flared to life, and the Leopard began moving around the bridge.
Marcus watched in fascination as the creature's enhanced senses analyzed each crew member. When Snow reached the communications officer, it stopped and sat down, staring directly at the Xerian officer.
Impossible, the admiral breathed. Commander Thexal has served loyally for 20 years. But Snow's enhanced intuition was unmistakable.
The Leopard's cybernetic systems had detected micro-expressions, pheromone changes, and biometric fluctuations that revealed the officer's guilt.
Commander Thexal, seeing that he'd been discovered, made a desperate grab for his sidearm.
But Snow was faster. The Leopard's cybernetically enhanced muscles launched it across the bridge in a blur of white fur and gleaming metal. The creature landed on the traitor, pinning him to the deck without seriously injuring him. Search his quarters, the Empress ordered.
Find out how he's been communicating with the enemy.
As security officers dragged the traitor away, the Empress looked down at Snow with obvious pride. Your modifications have given us a significant advantage. But now we must put them to an even greater test. She turned to address the bridge crew.
Prepare for battle. And, remember, the enemy thinks they're ambushing an isolated fleet. They have no idea what awaits them.
Marcus found himself assigned to a station where he could monitor Snow's cybernetic systems during the coming battle. As the enemy fleet drew closer, he realized that he was about to witness the most advanced war machine in the galaxy in action, with his own work playing a crucial role in the outcome. The first enemy salvo lit up the darkness of space, and the battle for Thanatos Prime began. But, this time, the Xerian Empire had an advantage their enemies couldn't have anticipated, a perfectly integrated fusion of biological intuition and cybernetic enhancement that could predict and counter their every move. Snow stood beside the Empress's command chair, its golden eyes reflecting the light of battle, ready to help secure victory for the Empire and its ruler. The space battle raged for 6 hours, and Marcus watched in amazement as Snow's enhanced abilities proved decisive time and again.
The Leopard could sense enemy attack patterns before they developed, its cybernetic systems translating biological intuition into tactical data that the fleet's computers could use.
When Hegemony fighters tried to use stealth technology to approach the flagship, Snow detected their presence through subtle vibration patterns that no mechanical sensor could identify. When enemy commanders attempted deceptive maneuvers, the Leopard's enhanced emotional reading abilities saw through their bluffs before they could spring their traps. The Xerian fleet fought with a precision and anticipation that left their enemies baffled. Every ambush was countered, every surprise attack was anticipated, every tactical gambit was turned against those who attempted it.
Hegemony fleet is requesting parley, the communications officer reported as the last enemy dreadnought's shields failed under concentrated fire. Accepted, the Empress replied. Put their commander on screen.
The main display flickered to life, showing a scarred Hegemony general whose species Marcus didn't recognize.
The alien's expression was one of complete bewilderment. Empress Zaralin, the general said through gritted teeth.
Your tactical prescience today was unprecedented.
How did you anticipate our every move?
The Empress smiled, an expression that was both beautiful and terrifying.
The Xerian Empire has many resources, General Carthax. Today you discovered one of them. Our intelligence indicated your fleet was isolated and vulnerable. Instead, we found ourselves outmaneuvered at every turn. This is not possible with conventional tactics.
Surrender your remaining ships, General, and I will allow your crews to return home with a message for your high command. The Empire's reach is longer than you imagine, and our sight clearer than you can comprehend. The general's image flickered and vanished as the hegemony ships powered down their weapons and prepared to surrender. Around the bridge, the crews celebrated their victory, but Marcus noticed that the Empress's attention remained focused on Snow.
How do you feel, my friend? She asked the Leopard in her native language.
Snow approached her chair and sat down, its cybernetic implants glowing softly in the bridge's dim lighting. The creature looked tired but content, its enhanced systems gradually returning to standby mode after the intense battle. Your work has exceeded all expectations, the Empress said to Marcus. Snow is not merely repaired, it is transformed into something greater than it was before. Marcus felt a mixture of pride and concern.
The enhancement potential is almost unlimited, Your Majesty.
But we need to be careful about how far we push the integration.
Snow is still a living being, not just a machine. Indeed. The Empress stood and moved to the large window overlooking the fleet. Which brings me to an important decision. I am offering you a position as Chief Biocybernetic Engineer for the Imperial Fleet.
You would oversee similar modifications for our entire military force. The offer was staggering. It would make Marcus one of the most powerful individuals in the galaxy, with resources beyond imagination at his disposal. But something about the prospect disturbed him.
Your Majesty, with respect, I don't think that's a good idea.
The bridge fell silent. Even the routine operational chatter stopped as every crew member turned to stare at the human who had just refused the Empress's offer.
Snow's ears twitched, and the Leopard's enhanced senses detected the sudden tension in the room.
Explain, the Empress said, her voice dangerously quiet. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that his next words could determine whether he lived or died.
Snow works because it's unique.
The modifications are successful because they were tailored specifically to its individual biology and psychology. If you try to create an army of enhanced warriors, you'll end up with either failures or abominations.
You think my military commanders would not benefit from enhanced intuition and tactical awareness?
I think you'd lose what makes them effective soldiers, Marcus replied. Snow is perfect because it's still essentially itself, just enhanced. But combat effectiveness comes from training, experience, and teamwork. If you replace those with cybernetic shortcuts, you'll create soldiers who are dependent on their enhancements instead of skilled in their own right. The Empress studied him for a long moment, her alien features unreadable. Snow, meanwhile, had moved to stand between them, as if sensing the potential for conflict. You would refuse unlimited power and wealth to maintain your principles, she asked.
Yes, Your Majesty. Because unlimited power without wisdom leads to destruction, and wealth without purpose is meaningless.
To Marcus's surprise, the Empress smiled.
Fascinating.
Most beings who discover power immediately begin planning how to acquire more.
But you see enhancement as a responsibility rather than an opportunity.
Snow trusts me because I fixed it without trying to change what it essentially is, Marcus said.
If I started mass-producing cybernetic modifications, I'd be breaking that trust.
The Empress nodded slowly.
Very well.
I withdraw my offer of a military position. Marcus felt his heart sink, thinking he'd just thrown away the opportunity of a lifetime. But then, she continued. Instead, I offer you something far more valuable, the position of Imperial Biocybernetic Advisor. You will work exclusively on cases like Snow's, helping individuals who need enhancement without losing themselves.
The offer was even more remarkable than the first.
It would give Marcus access to the most advanced technology in the galaxy while allowing him to maintain his ethical standards.
I accept, Your Majesty. But I have one condition. The bridge crew gasped at Marcus's audacity.
Even Snow looked surprised, its enhanced senses detecting the human's elevated stress levels despite his calm exterior. "You dare to negotiate with me?" the Empress asked, but her tone held amusement rather than anger.
"I want to continue learning.
I'll need access to research from across the galaxy, and I want to share my findings with other species."
Enhancement technology should benefit everyone, not just the Empire. "You want to give away Imperial secrets to our enemies?" "I want to ensure that enhancement technology develops responsibly throughout the galaxy.
If only the Empire has access to it, other species will feel threatened and try to develop their own versions in secret.
That could lead to catastrophic failures."
The Empress considered this for several minutes while the bridge crew waited in tense silence. Finally, she spoke. "Agreed, but with limitations. You may share general principles and safety protocols, but specific Imperial technologies remain classified.
And all research sharing must be approved by the Imperial Science Council."
"That's fair," Marcus agreed. Snow, who had been listening to the entire exchange with obvious intelligence, approached Marcus and rubbed against his legs. The Leopard's cybernetic implants pulsed in a pattern that seemed almost like communication. "It approves of your choice," the Empress observed.
"Snow has excellent judgment about character."
Over the following weeks, Marcus established his new laboratory aboard the Void's Edge. The Empress had given him access to resources that made his old workshop on Kepler Station look like a child's playroom. But, more importantly, she had given him access to Snow as a permanent research partner. The Leopard had become fascinated with Marcus's work, often sitting beside him as he developed new integration protocols. Snow's enhanced intelligence allowed it to provide feedback on how the modifications felt from the inside, helping Marcus refine his techniques. Their first major case came when they were summoned to help a Xerian pilot whose fighter had been damaged in battle. The pilot had suffered severe brain trauma, and conventional treatment had failed. The medical team wanted to replace the damaged tissue with cybernetic implants, but previous attempts had resulted in the pilot losing their natural flying instincts. Working together, Marcus and Snow developed a new approach. Instead of replacing the damaged brain tissue, they created a cybernetic interface that could work alongside the remaining biological structures. The implants served as a bridge, allowing the undamaged portions of the brain to communicate with the body while preserving the pilot's natural abilities.
The procedure was a complete success.
Not only did the pilot recover their flying skills, but the cybernetic enhancements actually improved their reaction times and spatial awareness. More importantly, they remained fundamentally themselves, with their personality and memories intact. Word of their success spread throughout the fleet, and soon Marcus and Snow were working on cases throughout the Empire. They helped a diplomat whose vocal cords had been damaged by poison gas, an engineer who had lost both hands in an accident, and a scientist whose enhanced sensory implants were causing debilitating seizures. Each case was unique, requiring Marcus to develop custom solutions that enhanced rather than replaced natural abilities. And each success proved his original theory: the key to successful biocybernetic integration was cooperation, not domination. 6 months after their first meeting, Marcus stood in his laboratory watching Snow play with a holographic interface that displayed complex mathematical formulas. The Leopard had become so integrated with the ship's computer systems that it could actually help with calculations, using its enhanced brain to process data in ways that pure machines couldn't match. "Amazing, isn't it?" the Empress said from behind him. Marcus turned to see her entering the laboratory with her usual graceful stride. "Every day I discover new capabilities. Snow is teaching me as much as I'm teaching it. Which brings me to why I'm here," she said. "The Galactic Council has requested a demonstration of our enhancement technologies. They're concerned about the military applications, but also intrigued by the medical possibilities." "What kind of demonstration?" "They want to see Snow in action, and they want to meet the human who made it possible." The Empress smiled. "It seems your reputation has spread beyond the Empire's borders." Marcus felt nervous excitement. The Galactic Council included representatives from hundreds of species, including Earth. It would be his first time seeing other humans since accepting his position with the Empire. "When do we leave?" he asked. "Tomorrow." But, Marcus, the Empress's expression grew serious. Be prepared for skepticism and fear. Many species will see our enhancements as a threat to the natural order. Others will want to acquire the technology for themselves. You must be diplomatic but firm about the principles we've established. The next day, Marcus found himself aboard a diplomatic ship heading for the Galactic Council station at the edge of the Milky Way. Snow rode beside him, the Leopard's enhanced senses taking in new experiences with obvious curiosity. As they approached the massive space station that housed the council chambers, Marcus realized that his work with Snow had led him to this moment, the chance to represent not just the Xerian Empire, but a new philosophy of enhancement that could benefit all sentient life. The galaxy was about to discover what could be achieved when technology and biology worked together in perfect harmony, guided by wisdom rather than ambition. And, at the center of it all was the trust between a human mechanic, an alien Empress, and an enhanced Leopard who had become something greater than the sum of its parts. Snow looked up at Marcus with golden eyes that held both ancient instinct and cybernetic intelligence, and Marcus knew that whatever challenges awaited them at the Galactic Council, they would face them together. The future of enhancement technology would be shaped by the principles they had learned together: cooperation over domination, wisdom over power, and trust above all else. As their ship docked at the station, Marcus straightened his shoulders and prepared to change the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be enhanced while remaining fundamentally alive.